good, Kitten Internet? It's been a bit since we last talked, and we need to talk. So it's been 3 months since my last video, not counting quick cat break, and a lot of things have happened in those 3 months. This is not the first time that I've tried to record a video in between. I keep having this happen. In this case, it's I record a video and then drastic things happen immediately afterward that invalidate the video. My last video record was 2 weeks ago, I think? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. And everything has changed again since then, so, you know, welcome to my life. So, just a quick catch-up as to what's been going on. I moved to Bergen, Norway in May of 2023. This is September of 2024. And so I've been living here for about 1.25 years. And I'm getting used to things. I have somewhat recently gone through a bunch of health issues. I mentioned a lot of these in the previous 1 year later update video, but here's the short version. I have several medical conditions that are obnoxious to deal with. I'm in pain pretty much all of the time, and it sucks. But in August, at the start of August, I had an appointment. So actually, at the end of July, I had enough of the medication that I was on. I was dealing with a side effect of the medication. I'm going to have a video specifically about my trials and tribulations dealing with that, because a lot of people don't really want to hear the details on it. That long story short, I needed to get off the medication, not to mention it was working a little too well for my blood pressure, and I was having massive dizzy spells from low blood pressure. So got pulled off the medication, my blood pressure started spiking again, as I would expect, because I didn't have any medication to replace it. I was just on my normal, moderate, high level of blood pressure meds. And this was an appointment at the start of August to basically go over and discuss, where do we go from here? And also, my mental health has been garbage. Could we do something about this? Please let me see a therapist. Spoke with my doctor. I had brought my partner with me. This was the first time that my new doctor and I had really sat down and discussed things. The only other appointment I had was just cleaning out my ears. And my partner asked me a bunch of questions, asked my partner a bunch of questions in Norwegian, which I only caught maybe about a third of what they were saying, and then laid this on me. So, I am going to put you on 50% medical leave. What? So for the month of August, I was on 50% medical leave from my work. I was only working 20 hours a week, specifically 4 hours a day. I decided that given that the whole point of it was for me to reduce my overall stress, it made more sense to have shorter days but every day of the week rather than longer days and just miss some days. And this was discussed with my doctor and everything, and it's like, okay, let's go ahead and give this a try. Let's see how well this works. Now, for a frame of reference, I had gone through medical leave on account of mental health issues. That would have been 2020? Or 2020? Yeah, I think it was toward the end of 2020. Might have been toward the end of 2021. No, it couldn't have been toward the end of 2021. I wasn't employed at the time. So yeah, it was toward the end of 2020. I had been given 3 weeks of medical leave. 100% medical leave, that is. And the effects of that were basically my blood pressure immediately fell like a rock. I went from having very high blood pressure, and most people, they would instruct you to go to the emergency room for that high of a blood pressure, down to close to normal levels. And it was very quick, very sudden of a difference. At the time, my job was incredibly stressful, so that made sense to me. And pointed at, yeah, my blood pressure problems are probably more to do with my stress than anything else, and or other psychosomatic issues. Psychosomatic issues are not, in fact, all in your head. For reference, it is your body telling you that there is something wrong and trying to ring every alarm bell it can to let you know that something's wrong. Anyway, so My current job is nowhere near as stressful as my previous job, so I wasn't expecting as dramatic of an effect. It would still be nice, and like my partner had pointed out, I wasn't taking lunches at my job. My lunch break I was taking as a nap break because I was so exhausted, and I basically didn't have enough energy to do anything during the day. It's part of the reason why I've stopped recording videos, because I was exhausted. So during this time, I was working 4-hour days, and I started noticing some changes. You might be able to notice one of them. Namely, I have lost a lot of weight. In the past month and a half now, I have lost approximately 6 kilograms, or about 15 pounds. Which is a lot to lose over the course of a month when the only thing that you're trying to do is relax. Turns out stress eating is not good for you, and I was stress eating more than I was expecting. That's my only guess, because I haven't intentionally changed my diet or anything, but I found myself significantly less hungry. So my meals started getting smaller, not because I was trying to cut down on eating, but because I was genuinely less hungry. And I also had more energy, which probably meant my metabolism was increasing. As a result of these things, I have lost weight, and my blood pressure is now normal, even though I'm down one of my blood pressure meds. As of last Wednesday morning, I'll get to why I'm specifying then, my blood pressure was 120/80, which is completely and totally normal for people. I haven't seen that blood pressure. Either I'm over-medicated or under-medicated, so I'm at one extreme or the other, and it's been that way since the last time that I took a medical leave. So I was on 50% medical leave all through August. In September, the first 2 weeks, so ending this past Friday, I've been on 40% medical leave, and then the next 2 weeks I'm on 20% medical leave, which is basically work 4 days a week and then work 3 days a week, then work 4 days a week. Given that I'm splitting my days up, or splitting the time off up among all of the days, this gets really complicated fast, but whatever, it's still time off, and it seemed to be going okay. As I've transitioned over to 40% instead of 50%, I have noticed that the health benefits have started tapering off. But so far was so good. Not only that, but my pain levels started dropping. That gives me a sign that the amplification of pain for me probably had more to do with psychosomatic issues and/or the fact that I just didn't have enough energy to move around constantly. I started being able to take hour-plus long walks every day. I felt probably the best that I had in over a decade. It was great. My last video was actually going to be talking about how I'm feeling much better now, both mentally and physically. I would actually go so far as to say mentally I was approaching okay, normal, and physically approaching what some guy in their 40s that isn't particularly in shape would be. It's amazing to me. Then 9/11 happened. So I'm not referring to the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in the United States on the 11th of September 2001. I am referring to the terrorist attack on my brain that happened from work. Some of you reading this may already know a little bit about this, but I'm going to go into more detail. And for reference, none of this is private. I have been talking about this with my fellow coworkers, supervisors, and so on. I tend to try to go at this from an open book perspective. I had received a heads up from my great-grand boss, basically saying, hey, look, you're going to be getting a weird and formal letter today. I can't talk about it. Do you have any questions? I got the letter later on that day. Sorry, great-grand boss said it would be the next day, but I actually got it that day. And it was a letter citing Article 15, Section 1 of the Norwegian Labor Code, indicating that my existing employer is looking to terminate my employment contract. And we would have a meeting on Friday, which, for reference, by this point was basically a little under 2 days later. More like a day and a half later in terms of business time. to discuss options before they start proceeding with the termination of my employment. So what I didn't mention was that the previous week I had been trying to buy a house. I actually nearly succeeded. I was the second to last bid. The way Norwegian housing markets work is that it's effectively an auction, and you just see what the current bid is, any restrictions on the bid, and you're given an option to bid higher and how much higher and so on. And I was the second to last bid. The person who won, their highest that they could go was just slightly higher than my own. So I lost the auction on the house by a few $100s, basically, in US dollars. A few thousand kroner in Norwegian kroner. So I had been under the impression that everything was perfectly fine, and all of a sudden I get a notice saying, oh, by the way, you're going to be terminated. What? Panic ensued. And it quickly dawned on me what must be going on, which is that I'm not being fired, I'm effectively being laid off. And come around on Friday, get into the meeting. The meeting was with myself, great grand boss, an HR person from the company that I worked for, or the company that I work with, a representative of the company that I technically work for. I'm technically a third-party contractor, or I work for a third-party contractor in order to facilitate HR work for Norway, to make things easier on the company, and also an HR person for the company that bought the company that I was working for, /with. And long story short, they're terminating the relationship with that third-party company, and they don't want a Norwegian resident working for them, because that exposes them to additional legal liability and legal tax laws and all of that stuff. Which is basically the conclusion that I came to as to what was going on. I was being let go because even though I had been told earlier it was perfectly fine and they understood and knew that I was a Norwegian resident and they were intending on creating a Norwegian presence specifically so I can continue working for them, they decided against it at the last moment. So the meeting was basically talking about what are the options beyond me leaving the organization. It was a not particularly long meeting because they didn't really have a whole bunch to say. All of it was, let me look into that and I'll get back to you type of answers. I think they could have been a little better prepared to answer things, but anyway, I kept things fairly professional, calm, smiling, laughing every so often, because it wouldn't help me getting upset with any of them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am upset and angry about this, but what good is yelling at a group of people where three of the four people that I was speaking with specifically did not want me to go and hated that we were even going through this process because it was dumb and shouldn't have been done. And the fourth person probably had nothing to do with any of it anyway and was just dragged in at the last moment. Or dragged in at the last moment when they decided on this. Either way, there's no reason for me to be upset with them. So I have effectively been given a couple of options. Either I can pursue being transferred to another country, or I can start going down the path of my loss of position and be let go from the company that I work for, which sucks. Again, that was last week at the same time I was going through an auction to buy a house. I am very happy that I lost that auction at this point. So there's been a lot of changes in the past week. So I actually have questions for you all. And I'm going to be linking to this video on my socials and so on, but so for reference, I've spoken with my partner about all of this. My boss basically told me to take the rest of the day off yesterday when the news got to me, and I explained it to my direct supervisor and talked with some friends and talked with my partner, and it basically boils down to this. I had decided that, Birkin, you know what? I'm willing to live here for another 5 years. That's the reason why I decided it's time to start looking for a house. So I have been under the impression up until last week that I was just going to stay here. Maybe 5 years down the line, I might decide to move to a different city in Norway, or maybe even leave Norway at that point. But I was going to stay here. I was going to continue learning Norwegian. I actually have been picking up a little bit more, finally, noticing that I am. And all of that got blown apart. Because now I need to decide what's more important, my job or my location. And this is the reason why I need some assistance. Because I have given my that HR person that's going to investigate things a list of countries that I might be willing to relocate to. And I know some people watching live in those countries, and I can absolutely use some assistance in just trying to give me an idea as to what might be going on, what working life might be like, what problems I should expect. Like, for an example, Fedrepanger in Norway is really freaking weird and does not make any sense to anybody outside of Norway, and that's something that somebody should warn me about. Weird things like that, or healthcare edge cases, or you get the idea. Just, hey, look, what is something that somebody coming into your country should probably know? That doesn't mean I'm going to relocate from Bergen, though. The whole reason why I gave a list of countries, and again, all of this is public. I have not lied or even lied through omission to anybody that I've spoken to at work. I want to know what my options are before making a decision. Which means, like, for instance, for an example, one of the countries that I put on the list is Ireland. I want to know, how much would you be paying me if I relocated to Ireland? What benefits would I have with the company if I relocated to Ireland? Are you going to pay for the relocation? Because holy hell, I do not want to pay for another move. Things like that. I need to know this information before I can make a proper choice. But realistically, I'm currently assuming that I'm going to be leaving my company because I don't know if I can be given an offer that I'd be willing to accept. I think it's possible. I take that back. I know it's possible that they can give me an offer that I would say yes to. I don't know if it's possible if they would give me an offer that I would say yes to. That's kind of the thing. It's the whole, yeah, a corporation could technically pay me $1 million a month and probably not even notice that much. They're not going to, and nor would I expect them to, but they could. What I don't know is what's realistic. And part of what's realistic is me knowing what the conditions are in the various countries, how much things cost. That I can mostly look up, although I can absolutely use tips as to what websites to use for various given countries. Anyway, so country list. And part of this is also I need to have a work visa. So I am only authorized to work in the United States and Norway as it is right now. In theory, because my partner is a Norwegian citizen, I might be able to, or I should be able to get a similar fiancé visa if my partner moves to any of the Nordic countries. But anything beyond that, I would need a visa for. So we've got the country list. So we've got Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. Nordics, in theory, I don't need a work visa. I would still probably request one because I think the work visa process is quicker than the family visa process, and they want me to not be in Norway by the end of the year. There's only 3 months left to the end of the year. I don't think it's feasible for them to do anything but a work visa in that level of time, but we'll see. Anyway, so yeah, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. Finland, I know, is going to be hell language-wise, because it's related to absolutely no language on the planet other than Magyar. It's not related to any of the languages either my partner or I know, so it's going to be rough. But at the same time, and also climate is not great. Honestly, the climate of Bergen is almost perfect for me, which is part of the reason why I'm reluctant to leave. But okay, so I've been looking online, trying to pick out similar-sized cities to where I'm currently living. This is about the right size for me. Bergen and Madison were roughly the same size. They're not necessarily laid out in similar ways, But the whole goal of me aiming at a city this size is to make sure I have reasonably good public transit, be able to get to where I want to go, when I want to go, without weird, long, lengthy transit times and so on. Anyway, so Finland, I know about the language issue. Yeah. Denmark and Sweden, they're at least similar to Norwegian, which is beneficial to my partner and detrimental to me because I am going to be utterly ruined when it comes to learning a language. Sweden does have the advantage of the fact that I don't technically need to know Swedish in order to be able to become a permanent resident, whereas in Denmark, and in Norway for that matter, I need to know their respective languages in order to become a permanent resident. In addition, Denmark is much closer to the rest of mainland Europe, which gives some advantages when it comes to buying things from, say, Germany and so on. But there's also disadvantages in that due to the current political climate in Europe, a lot of countries are getting much more anti-immigrant. And Denmark is very high on that list right now. Sweden is starting to get up there on that list too. Their government policies are still relatively, well, they're weird. Anyway, point is, there's definitely detriments to that as well. It's mostly an advantage to Creator and less of an advantage for me. Then we have the next tier down, so to speak, which everything beyond this I would require a work visa for. That would be Scotland and Ireland. They're both English-speaking countries, so don't have a language barrier for either Creator or myself. Scotland is not that dissimilar in climate to Bergen. It's less rainy, and that's about it. So climate-wise, it's probably good enough for me. Less rainy and a bit colder in winter, I should say. Not counting the Highlands, I'm talking about major cities. Coastal cities, specifically. Ireland, I've already visited Ireland before. I know that I would probably be perfectly fine living in Ireland. The main disadvantages to those two locations are, one, further away from Norway. That is a major problem for Creator. And two, getting there. So you can't, I've mentioned this in a video a while back before I had ever moved to Norway. You can't actually fly with cats in the cabin directly to the British Isles. You have to fly to France and go through the Channel, and then once you're in the British Isles, you can fly amongst the British Isles with cats. I will not allow my cats to be in in the cargo hold. That is a red line. I will not allow that to happen. So there's some major hurdles that we would have to deal with when it comes to transporting cats. And it wouldn't just be my cats. It would also be Creator's cats. So, yeah, that's a major problem. Yeah, that's really most of the problems. It's the distance, it's the fact that I would need a work visa, which also means that I am tied to my employer. If my employer decides one day, nope, we don't want this person anymore, we're laying them off, then I'm a little stuck and don't have the greatest way of being able to go anywhere other than the US. And transportation of cats. The final tier are the European countries that we might be willing to relocate to. These are ones that, again, I would still need a work visa, and they consist of Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. They're all, other than Switzerland, Northern Europe, Northwestern Europe. They all have several things in common, namely they all speak some type of Germanic language, which is going to be easier for Creator to pick up, and still going to ruin me on languages. Any country other than Ireland and Scotland is going to ruin me on languages. And I know people in several of those countries. Like, I have friends in the Netherlands, I have a friend in Belgium, I have an acquaintance in Switzerland. So it's not a complete blank move, but it's pretty darn close. The main difficulties there are language, culture. Culture is probably less of an issue in my mind. Being somebody from the US and also living in Norway for an extended period of time and chronically online, culture changes don't really bother me that much for the most part. They'll be weird, but I adjust to them. the weird part's mostly just like grocery stores not being open on Sundays here. Anyway, so if you or anyone that you know lives or has lived for an extended period of time in those countries, please let me know. The types of things that I want to know are basically like, what's working life like, specifically with respect to like labor laws and employee rights and stuff like that. Because the meeting that I had on Friday was because Norwegian labor law required it. And it was said repeatedly in the meeting, the only reason why we're having this formal procedure is because we're required to do it this way. And the only thought that I had was, so if it wasn't required, would you have even told me? Yeah. And again, as I said, I mostly am sure that I'm probably going to end up saying no to their offers. It's not that I'm not going to consider it. I absolutely will. But this is close to where Creator wants to live. This is a reasonable climate and reasonable things for where I want to live. Yes, I have problems with the country. I've mentioned that quite a bit in the previous video. That, hey, look, I think that I probably belong more in Madison than I do in Bergen. But I also don't belong in Madison. That's kind of the whole thing about this, is that I don't know where I belong. So I'm willing to potentially give things a shot, but it's painful to be moving around like this. So I only want to do it once. Okay, well, I think that's about it. I know I'm not showing any cats at the moment. My cats are currently curled up. One of them's loafing to my right. The other one is curled up to my left. Let's see if I can get some cat photos. There's Zone Kitty, all curled up. Hi, Zone. I actually had my cats on top of each other. Was that yesterday or the day before? I know it was after all of the bad news. Hi, Yasin. I know. So, they're getting along a little bit better now. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to give the cat update. Silly human, forgetting about the part that everybody cares about. So, cat update. My cats have been getting along significantly better. We had a vet visit in like the end of May, beginning of June. It was around the time of my last video. I don't think it had happened yet, or it might have just happened and the results of it hadn't gone through yet. But basically had a vet visit, got recommended a new variety of Feel Away. Feel Away is a cat pheromone thing that you just plug into the wall. It pumps cat pheromones to try to calm down cats. The first two types of Feel Away that I had tried basically did nothing to Isun and Zone. They did affect Boo, but they didn't really affect Isun and Zone, which kind of defeats the whole point, because the whole point was to try to get them to stop fighting each other. This variety works. They calmed down almost immediately. I had been going from multiple cat fights a day, utter chaos, dealing with, like, whenever Creator's out, which means that the litter boxes aren't being cleaned as often, because I'm bad at that. Utter chaos happening, the two of them at each other's throats, ripping each other's hair out. Claws, blood. It was bad. It was almost bad enough where I thought about permanently separating them again. And within about a couple of hours of plugging in the Feel Away into upstairs and downstairs in this apartment, they just started calming down. My cats are actually behaving themselves. Zone still has a really strong prey instinct and will chase Isun around. But it's become more of a Zone is trying to play and Isun doesn't want to play situation. When I go to bed at night, the two of them are sleeping on top of me, and generally don't have a problem with each other when they're on bed with me. As I mentioned, either yesterday or the day before, I had both of them on top of me, and Zone was actually on top of Isun at the time. That they had not cuddled up on top of each other like that in a decade at this point. So, at least that's good news. About the only good news as of late. Alright, it's been about half an hour. I'll talk to you later, Internet. Bye.